Hello, Louis from Spitfire Audio here. It's been quite a while since we've done a composing with Labs video together, and I do enjoy making them as they were some of the first videos I've ever made for the channel. So for this one, we're going to be jumping in and looking at the demo I've written for LABS Dulcimer. And if there's any particular labs that you want to see in future videos, please let me know down below and I can sort that out. Without further ado, here's my demo. So, as I'm sure you've heard, layering is quite a key component of this piece. And speaking of keys, so it goes quite nicely into the key of the piece, which is D flat major. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the piece by each instrument section. So starting with the dulcimer, and then moving to the piano, the strings, and then our percussion at the end there. And then we'll look at some of the extra little plugins I've added onto the end of the mix. Now, I was never really quite sure what a dulcimer was before writing this piece. I'm sure I've heard it before in like many sort of medieval themed shows or games. There's many different variations, but one of the main ones is hammered, and it's kind of like if you take a grand piano, make it smaller, take the keys off, take the lid off, and you've just got the sort of the strings there, and you hit it with mallets or hammers. They kind of look like spoons, but some of the other variations are fingered variations where you pluck the strings. They look a little bit more like a kind of guitar that you lay on your lap. But taking a look at the LABS plugin, you can see that we've got 5 wonderful articulations. Some of the main 2 that I've used are the fingered and hammered. We've also got a mini variation, which is a completely different sort of tone from these 2, as well as a gliss. So you hold the note down, you get these wonderful little slides up and down, and then also a tremolo patch. So in my piece, I began with a couple of the fingered articulation tracks. So opening up the first track, which is playing a high D flat on every beat of the bar. You'll notice on the first beat of each bar that the note's accented slightly by turning up the velocity. just there. And that plays throughout the whole of the piece, helping to establish that key of D flat major all the way up until bar 73, where we have this break here, before joining us again at bar 89 until the end, where things start to stop and fade out. Our second track, almost the exact same, just played 2 octaves below and a slightly different rhythm. And our third finger track at the beginning is just playing these D flat 5 chords, again all the way through the piece up until that break, before rejoining us at bar 89, sounding like this. And that plays every 4 bars, really establishing our key and our tonality throughout the entire piece. So as these little rhythms and pedal points continue, we've got a few hammered articulations up at the top here. So the first one here, playing this little melody with a little bit of a call and response action going on with our lower hammered track here, sounding like this. And you can see I've panned those 2 tracks slightly apart from each other, just to create a little bit of separation there. And then at the end of this section, we have these 3 octaves being played, each one being played on a different track that's panned quite extremely, with our last note being panned more center there, sounding like this. And you can hear there's a lot of reverb on that as well, to give that a bit of depth and make it seem like it's being played in a really large room. So as we move on in the piece, what I'd call our sort of main verse, we're introduced to some new piano tracks, some string tracks and some percussion tracks. And then a little bit later on down the line, we get a few more dulcimer rhythms and melodies before we get our main melody that I'd put on these 2 mini dulcimers here. So our first new rhythm on this fingered articulation here, sounding like this. So if you hold all of those notes down there, it creates a B flat minor 7th chord. If we look at it from the point of view of these 2 notes being together, and then these 2, you could see that I'm playing on the root inversions of a D flat 5 chord, and then a B flat 5 chord. And playing that B flat 5, it almost sounds like a minor chord, because we've so heavily established that our key of the piece is a D flat major. So adding that D flat to the B flat 5 would make it a B flat minor. Then our second rhythm on the mini dulcimer sounds like this. So you can see how the tone of the mini dulcimer is completely different to that of the fingered and the hammered articulations. And it's just alternating between a D flat and an A flat, keeping our key of the piece in mind. And looking at our main sort of melody in the piece, I've given it to the mini dulcimer here. And you can see I've split it across 2 tracks, one of them taking a higher line and the other one taking the lower line. And the reason for that being is so I could pan the higher one to the left and the lower one to the right, like I've done before in the introduction, to create that call and response fashion. So the higher line being, and then the low line taking over, coming from the right here. And what's important to notice when I put these 2 tracks together is every 4 beats of the bar, we're landing on a lower D flat there, just like our chords that I went through from the beginning. So that takes us all the way up to the break at bar 73, with our newer rhythms on the fingered and the mini dulcimer articulations still remaining during this break. And then we've got a new mini dulcimer rhythm at the bottom here, sounding like this. So you see we're introducing a little bit of chromaticism there, going between the F and the G flat. And then at the top here, we've got our final dulcimer track being introduced about halfway in the break at bar 81. And it begins by playing these 3 chords in a sort of descending motion, sounding like this. See, we've got that first chord being our B flat 5 again. We've got an A flat major and a G flat 5. And then it plays this little melody, kind of acting like a little improvisation over the top of everything else, bringing all of our other sections back in, including all of our previously mentioned dulcimer tracks there. You can see the velocity is quite high on some of this. And the range within the dulcimer itself is quite high, with the melody playing around with the key of that D flat major, but kind of dancing around and gravitating more towards an F minor kind of sound. So you can see these final 3 notes here at the end. Got the F, A flat, and a C. So that makes up our F minor chord, and then ending on a little high C drone at the top there. I want to go ahead and solo out all the dulcimer and play it from the break so you can hear how all of these different lines build up and then towards the end gradually stop and fade out until we're reduced to nothing. See how we're focusing on the F there. Looking at our main melody, you can see we're gradually beginning to decrease the expression, just tapering that off for all the tracks as they come to their end and begin to stop. Also looking at the tempo here, I've decreased that towards the end so everything nicely slows down just before we finish. So we're moving on to our soft piano section now, and we only have 3 tracks. The first one being quite an interesting one, starting relatively close to the beginning, and it's a reverse track. So what I've done is I've played a D flat 5 chord, got an octave at the bottom here, and then an A flat there at the top. And then I've just held that down for 4 bars, and then looped that all the way until the end. And then after that I right-clicked, bounce in place, gave me an audio track. So if I open that up, I would have gone onto File, highlighted the whole thing, clicked Functions, and then Reverse. And that gives me a really cool sound throughout the piece like this. I'll just play it a little further on because I've also got the automation of the volume at the beginning there. Provides a really nice pulse, especially with some of the reverb within the UI, as well as some extra little plugins I've added. So beginning our first section here, we've got this second piano track that's not playing in reverse. And it plays these chords that are very similar to the ones that we heard in the break, being the B flat 5, A flat major, and the G flat 5. But with this one, they're all fifths spanned over 2 octaves. And like with most of our dulcimer patches, this continues throughout the whole piece, only it's not playing during that break. And the same can be said for this final piano track here, which plays an ascending little pattern going up in thirds or fourth intervals. Opening it up, there's no strange notes here, still all playing in that B flat major key. So if I actually play the bottom line separately from the top, you can see how they're almost playing a D flat major scale. So the bottom line sounding like this. So a little jump at the end there, and it's playing on every beat of the bar. And then our higher line sounding like this. So there's a few little jumps in there, and then together. And you can hear that ascension never quite resolves as we bring it to the top there, as it doesn't really land on a secure D flat major or D flat 5 chord. And the chord it lands on in the end for the break is an F minor 7th. Sounds like this. I mean, I don't need to tell you how great this soft piano sounds. So we're going to move on to our string section now, and like with the dulcimer, a lot of these tracks are mainly rhythmical and stay on the same note. So we begin during our first section here with these 2 short string tracks, and I've tried to divide it up between whereabouts they're playing their range. So we've got this mid one and this low one here. If I open them both up, you can see between them, again, just an octave on a D flat. And then as we grow all the way up until the break here, you can see that the shape and the distance between the notes grow as well, becoming a lot wider. So I'll go ahead and play this section here, and also note there's some little added notes there as well. So the rhythm sounds like this. So then the lower shorts stop in the break, while our higher shorts continue on. And then as we join back up again, we've got another short line that's even higher, just playing an octave there, a higher one. And then as we come to a close, we get a little bit smaller with the A flat here, making this again another D flat 5 chord. When our low string shorts return, they're playing a slightly different thing from what they were playing before, almost matching some of the lower stuff the dulcimer was playing. And you can see we're alternating between about 4 octaves here. They're actually playing the chords that our little improvised bit the dulcimer in the second section is playing. So if I just solo the lower shorts out and then play the hammered dulcimer from here again, let's see how that sounds. And we're finishing on another D flat octave there before reducing to the D flat 5 at the end. Then looking at another earlier string part, we've got a low bass drone in the longs, and would you be surprised it's playing a low D flat, almost matching the same kind of rhythm that our fingered chords in the dulcimer are playing. So just playing that every 4 bars. If I go and look at the modulation here, you can see that I've automated that in these sort of waves to help give the strings a little bit of depth. So that leaves us with these 4 higher string tracks playing the long articulation. So it's first introduced in our first section just before the break, before these other 3 tracks come in and play these chords together. If I open up the piano roll there, you can see that it kind of bases itself around that B flat a little bit, starting on the B flat and ending on the F. And coupled up, let's just add the dulcimer so you can hear how that sounds all together. Let's add our bass drone as well. Just a really simple little melody. There's our shorts. And then as we return in our second section, I'll open the piano roll up for all 4 of these tracks, and you can see the chords that they're playing. So opening up the piano roll, we begin with an A flat octave with an E flat on the top, and a C and an F moving into E flat, A flat, and then another E flat on the top there, before finishing on 2 loads of a D flat and an F, making that our nice D flat major finish. And it sounds like this. You can see that the dynamics for each of the tracks have been automated to help with that realism and expression. And that just leaves us with our percussion. And I've predominantly used hand Zimmer percussion for this, although I wanted some shakers, so I added them from our Spitfire percussion library as well. So I'll play you through our percussion section with the piano section for reference, and I'll talk you through all the different tracks and instruments I'm using. So we're beginning with the tombecs here at the start of our first section. Again, another little rhythm. It's only a bar long, just being repeated. Got that expression there, helping to fade us in. Got another tombec track. Velocity is a bit high with that one. You can also hear our shakers coming in from Spitfire Percussion Library. I've got these nice clicks here in the taikos and the boobams. The taikos being panned to the right and the boobams panned to the left with a nice bit of reverb. And then of course the dolls there playing this rhythm. Mainly the same, just with extra little notes and certain bars to add a little bit more interest. And we've got these bombos here in the break. Pretty much playing on every beat and of the bar. Everything comes back in again with another taiko track, similar to what the tombecs are playing. So there's the taiko one. Just zoom out a little. And there's the tombecs. These two adding a bit of power. And then we're beginning to fade out now. Pretty much all of the percussion, it all fades out gradually, as do other sections. The dulcimer parts and the strings and the piano, before we end on that nice reverse note. And I think that tempo change at the end there is really nice as we start to fade out. And that pretty much does it for how I've constructed the piece. We can go ahead and look at the mix now. So you can see with certain tracks here, I've messed around with the EQ just to make certain sounds a little bit brighter or a little bit warmer. So for example, with these 3 notes that are panned in our introduction section, I've made it sound a lot brighter by taking out some of that low end there. Also on some of the tracks, you'll see there's a sample delay just to add a little bit more depth and help to aid with the reverb and making it sound a little bit more spaced out. And then talking about reverbs, we've got a couple of buses here with our Lexicon and our VSS3 on the large warm hall setting, as well as our isotope imager and a limiter at the end there. Thanks ever so much for watching. It was a real treat to be able to do one of these again, and if there's a particular LABS demo or trailer piece that you want me to look through, I can definitely do that in a future video. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.